Alundra. Alundra is one of my favorite games of all time. And on that particular list, there is something very unique about it. It's a game that I love, but I've never actually completed, which is a weird thing to say. Usually you wouldn't put uncompleted games on your favorite games of all time list. That must mean it can't be that great. But there is something very special about Alundra. It's just that back in the day, I was, shall we say, a bit of a tool. Not particularly clever nor patient. And over the years I've played it multiple times, absolutely loving it, especially when I evolved into a slightly less moronic Jordan. It just so happens that things have gotten in the way of me actually getting over the finishing line. Well, after 20 years, I've done it for a bit more Jordan. Alundra is an epic masterpiece of an action-adventure game. It's basically following the Legend of Zelda formula, but actually being brave about it. This is not a game for kids. Tough combat, even tougher brain-busting puzzles, and some slightly infuriating platforming. It's a game that dares to challenge the player. However, this is a meticulously crafted, perfectly planned 30-hour adventure full to the brim with more content and puzzles than any other game of its kind. And to top it all off, it has a fascinating adult-oriented story that doesn't pull any punches either. It features religious aspects, murder, deceit, and has the interesting premise of our titular Alundra having the ability to jump into people's dreams to overcome their nightmares. And I can't wait to take you through it. And a big thank you to my wonderful Patreon supporters. It really means the world to me that you want to support me in the way that you do. If you want to support me and my dream, then consider checking out my Patreon with the link in the description. You can get videos early, including the Big Daddy video, this one, plus some bonus content. Yes, Alundra's bonus video is a review of Landstalker, which was worked on by many of the same members as Alundra. You can see the visual trademarks and style, a classic Mega Drive game. That will be on the Patreon in the coming days, perhaps next week, depends how busy I am, but it will be there and it will be entertaining, I promise you. It's only a quick look and it will eventually be more widely public, but for now it is exclusive to those who support me in that way. They also voted for the next episode, which, well, actually it's a draw, but I'm gunning for Jackie Chan because he's my idol, and then I'll do Silent Hill afterwards. So yeah, if you want to decide which games I make a video about, then consider clicking the link in the description. Patreon.com/abitmorejordan. Alundra released in Japan on the PlayStation 1 in 1997. I was going to show you my physical Japanese copy, but I'm on holiday so I can't. Here's a Google picture. It reached a Western audience in early '98. I think this is a very important point because while I think those who played Alundra will have said it was an incredible game if looked at from the right angle, but the look and feel of it is quite out of place. Looking at the game, you'd have thought it was from the first year or so of the console, maybe from '95 alongside Suikoden, not a game that came out in the same year as Resident Evil 2, Metal Gear Solid, Spyro the Dragon, Final Fantasy Tactics, Crash Bandicoot 3, Xenogears, Parasite Eve, Gran Turismo, and the most important comparison of all, Ocarina of Time, which I will get to in about an hour's time. Now this game is utterly gorgeous. It has some of the best 2D sprite work ever made in my opinion. But in '98 they were all about those polygons and people loved counting them back when you could literally count them. It was a different world with a different viewpoint. Thankfully Alundra's epicness didn't wholly affect the critics' viewpoint either. Scoring very highly pretty much everywhere. And considering the graphical horrors it was up against, that was no mean feat. I mean, 86 on Metacritic is damn good. If a game that looks out of time and out of place but still can get all the plaudits, it must be something very special, and Alundra most certainly is. Before we get into the actual gameplay, it's worth talking about Working Designs. They were the ones responsible for localizing this game, and they tended to always go a step further than necessary in some regards. I think most people love them for adding their own personality onto the titles and smearing an extra layer of love over them, but I do know some people felt they did overstep the mark on occasion. One of the big changes they did to this game was the intro movie that plays. Before you get to the main menu, you're greeted with this rocking tune that cuts between some badass anime cutscenes alongside some all-action gameplay segments. I have to admit, they kinda sold me. This is quite a bit different from the original Japanese version, which doesn't have that rocking music and consists entirely of gameplay. A lot of it. So much so, this is borderline spoilers. They pretty much show all the game has to offer. And this is 4 minutes long. I mean, they went all out with that, perhaps too much. It does give you a better sense of the game with puzzles and stuff going on, but it's definitely spoiling too much. You can watch the original Japanese version if you don't touch the controller when on the opening screen. As you press start, you'll see the intro of a ship at sea with your man Alundra sailing upon it. Alundra is a dreamwalker, or as people call him, or as people like to call him, Freak, which is nice of them. He has the ability to delve into people's dreams. These days he's plagued with the same dream of a man named Lars, it's probably Scandinavian. He pleads to him to head to a village called Inoa, as an impending shadow from the slumbering evil that is Melzas is about to awake. You are apparently the only hope, and that's why you're on this ship. After wandering around, chatting to people, getting called a freak boy, it's time to take a nap. Once again you have the same dream, but this time, when you wake up, it's in the middle of a storm. As I'll always say, once it gets stormy, you know shit's about to go down. And yes, this is easily a double flush, as the ship is wrecked. Your man Alundra here survives the crash and is washed up on a beach only to be found by a wandering blacksmith. You wake up in bed to see this man just staring at you. When you wake up in a strange bed with no recollection of the previous night's events, and you got a guy with a handlebar mustache staring at you, well, that must have been quite the party. Better head to the clinic though, just in case. This Jess fella comes across as a bit of a simpleton with his heart in the right place. As he immediately introduces himself, he tells you his job and saying it's no big deal, as though we were about to make a big deal out of it. It's like how I randomly walk into hospital wards and tell people, I have a YouTube channel with 85,000 subscribers, no big deal, get well soon. He's also incredibly needy, as he says you can stay here until you get well enough, at which point he'll become a lonely fat man again. Yeah, I guess they didn't have psychologists back in ye old Zelda days. I mean, just look at Alundra's face. That is I feel mega awkward right now if I ever saw one. You're now free to explore a little bit of your hub village Inoa. It's small but packed with houses and important people to the plot. You'll instantly meet Sybil, who's totally not creepy with her robotic eyes. She's gonna laser you to death if you're not careful. You'll meet a couple of Americans, you know, just doing their bits. Per usual, you'll eventually stumble upon Wendell's household with his family in a panic. The man is bedridden. At their wits' end, they ask you to go fetch Septimus. Yeah, let the person who literally just landed here find the doctor in an emergency. That sounds like the plan of someone who's in line for some inheritance money. Thankfully, Septimus isn't far away, and as you do meet him, he seems to know exactly what kind of person you are. Harry Potter, apparently. Oh wait, you're a dreamwalker, which is fortunate for the sake of the plot. Septimus is a nice researcher who came to this area to help solve the freaky things going on, but he's kind of hit a brick wall. For some random reason, he suggests you head to a place called Tarn Manor, just to look for a clue. It is a very poor excuse. Maybe he could have said, oh, I remember my former teacher had a book on the subject, but it's too dangerous for me to go and retrieve it. If only someone could help me. Bam, just fix your plot for you. So yeah, you basically need to go find an old tomb which may help the old man recover before he's put in an actual tomb. Heading eastward, if you fumble around a bit, you may stumble upon the manor, but you'll be getting into a few scraps along the way, namely from the totally not the same blobs as those in Zelda. They wouldn't dream of copying such a series. You swing your sword with the square button, and that's all you can really do for the minute. There's no blocking or dodges, it's very much of its time. You'll gain access to more badass weaponry later, but for now it's all about taking potshots at the enemy while avoiding their attacks. Your health is signified by these diamonds up at the top. I guess they didn't want to use hearts and push the Zelda thing too much. Over the course of the game, you'll pick up expansions to the health, but you'll always only see 10 at a time on the top. You'll see 10 out of 14. The health bar kind of wraps around, which is not quite as enjoyable as a reach around, but it'll do. Kind of like how a boss will have one health bar, but multiple colors of it. You know those games. You should find your way to Tarn Manor easily enough. The game tells you to go directly east, which isn't actually possible, so you need to go a slightly long way around, but you'll get there, and I say this is the perfect introduction level to the game. Now this game can be brutal, which I will get to no doubt later on, but Tarn Manor provides a light take on what's to come. It gets you used to switch hitting, walking over switches and putting weights on them, alongside deadly traps from above. You'll be getting used to more troublesome enemies, with these monkeys crossed with Wolverine. Melzas will intermittently pop in to tell you that he's totally not worried about you at all. He's coming across almost as needy as Jess at this point. You'll make your way back to the old man, who now has a large gathering of family, each anticipating their share of the will. Okay, they do seem genuinely worried, especially one who says that they'll die without the old man. A bit dramatic. Handing over the big-ass book to Septimus, That will enlighten him with the knowledge of how you can save the old man by delving into his dreams and defeating whatever haunts him. Septimus can teach you how to do so. Wait a minute, are you saying that Dreamwalker Alundra here doesn't know that he's actually a Dreamwalker? Or something like that? Yeah, it doesn't quite make a whole lot of sense. Although the manual does say that he's crippled by a lack of knowledge of how to use his skill effectively. Well, that could have been conveyed a little better with some small tweaks to the dialogue, but Script Dr. Jordan here is 25 years too late. Why didn't they call me when I was 8? I mean, these are small cracks within what is a very good story overall. Alundra is a very dark game if you've not gathered already. Sure, it has a mustache-twirling Sauron wannabe as a villain, but it has a mature theme with serious moments, good characters, and more plot points and details that put any Zelda to shame. I mean, here we are, right now, delving into an old man's dream. And no, it's not Werther's original land where you can suck the trees of hard caramel candy, but in fact a misty puzzle dungeon where he's about to get overwhelmed by blobs and potentially die. Again, this is a simple, logical dungeon where you hit switches, which moves boxes so you can get past. There's even one of those root memory pieces which, as someone with the memory of a comatose goldfish, yeah, I struggled. But you'll get there and you'll get to your first boss, which is a giant blob. How original. It seems a bit pansy at first, easy to get around, but smack it enough times and it will keep splitting into smaller pieces, which if you're not careful can overwhelm you. It's actually quite fun. There ain't a lot of space to swing a cat, never mind a sword. But you'll do it and you'll have freed Wendell from his nightmare, a nightmare which could very well have killed him in real life. After saving him, you're invited to see Ronan, who's basically the village priest. This seems insignificant at first, but does play quite an important role later on. Disaster then strikes at the coal mines. An earthquake crushes the entrance and only one miner made it out alive, and he's in dire need of help. You want to find out what happened and why, so it's time to delve into his feverish dream. Or is it a memory, or does it really matter? Here you're introduced to the miners, and also the solution to a small puzzle coming up. It turns out those dastardly apes from the Murgg, crazed simians from another area, they are making their way through the tunnels to attack the village. You have to fight in the stream, and you're rewarded with... oh, never mind. Yeah, kind of an issue with this game is because you're delving in and out of different people's dreams, there are so many missable items. Because you can't go back, you can't delve back into the same dreams again, because that would be creepy as hell. Would you mind if I just popped back into your dream? I forgot my keys. So yeah, I missed this chest, whatever it is, I hope it wasn't a life piece. With Olen succumbing to his injuries, everyone's a bit down on the loss of life, particularly Jess, who shows you the mining bomb. Well, he shows this to you, then tells you to stay away, you little tease. Obviously you can't, so it's time to get your first secondary weapon and blast open the mines to see what the jig is and hopefully rescue some trapped miners. The coal mines, probably the first proper dungeon in Alundra. It's a very meaty experience with lots of rooms, different areas connected by the good old minecarts. It will take you a good half an hour or so to get through, and this is where your skills will be tested in both combat and with your brain. The switch hitting mechanics are stepped up a notch, and here's where you want to get used to one of the more difficult aspects of the game, the platforming. Yeah, Alundra doesn't have the best jump in the world, but by golly the game wants you to use it, either jumping at weird angles on tiny platforms or reaching out to ledges that you can barely get to, often leading you to think, is it actually possible to jump there? Yeah, I remember back in the day, and even to this day, I've come to a platforming part, tried many times, failed, and thought to myself, do I actually need to do this now, or will I be able to do it later on? You often question yourself, which is not great. It is very easy to lose your sense of direction when you get to one of these points, wandering around aimlessly looking for an alternative. When in fact, you could do it, it's just very hard to do it. And I'll freely admit the platforming could have been thought through a little bit better, or at least have been a little more generous to compensate. It doesn't help there can be some weird perspectives where you're not sure if something is above you, or level with you, or in the foreground, background. Perspective is a big issue, and it does not get any better. But overall, it is a great dungeon to give you a taster of what's to come, I love the little cinematic sequences of when you're in the minecart and you're slamming into enemies or avoiding boulders. Of course, it's all scripted, has no real danger, but it does add some sense of adventure. There's no big boss here, which is a relief, as you'll come across the giant monkey who helicopters the frig off. Not before he tells you about 7 crests that they're collecting, which sounds suspiciously like Zelda. But more on those later. After leaving the mines via the side entrance, you'll come across the world's most badass treehouse. I guess monkeys didn't want to move away from the stereotype, instead embracing it. It seems you can't go there yet, so it's back to the village you go. Robotic laser eyes lady, Sybil, asked to talk with you now that she knows your true power. She is the woman in the village who dreams when she is awake. She has prophetic visions about upcoming events. She sees that the apes are aligned with Melzas, and something funky is going off with Kline. You see very distressing signs of what's to come, and you are asked to stop it. I will say it's definitely worth exploring the village properly, getting to know where everyone is, since it is a ball ache to navigate, especially if you're looking for a specific person like Sybil. She was literally the last house I looked in, so get to know the place, talk to a few people, and you'll also get a lot of background info. For example, Lutus tells you a bit about Jess's past, how he lost both his wife and young son. Sorry for calling you a simpleton, my dude. Anyways, it's time for the next dungeon. Remember that Swedish spirit you were introduced to right at the beginning? Well, he wants to test your skills, to see if you can really be the hero of time. I mean, hero of dreams, maybe? Yeah? As you're paying respect to the fallen miners, his spirit calls you to his tomb for one fiendish-ass dungeon. One that probably helps give Alundra the reputation it has. Oh man, I know this dungeon pissed off quite a few people. It has aggressive enemies and puzzles that actually make use of your brain. Yes, the biggest instance of this puzzle is here with these 5 ghosts, each of whom have something to say. You have to talk to them and then put them in the right order. Now, as a kid, I was as dumb as they come, and the fact that I had to read and pay attention to what they said and actually take it on board, it rattled my brain. Now, as a 31-year-old, I found the magic of a notepad, and actually, it was a piece of piss. I worked it out rather gracefully, apart from doing it completely the wrong way around, but that's beside the point. The main point is, have a pen and paper by your side, because I really think it will help with the puzzles in this game. Aside from that puzzle, there is another one which has you going 1 step forward, 2 steps back, which I knew what it meant. I knew it, of course, it's obvious, right? But I didn't quite get where the first step began, nor did I realize that if you messed up one time, it wouldn't do anything no matter if you did it right that time. You have to go out of the entire room thing and then start again. Yeah, these puzzles can be very specific. You'll be tested against a Guardian boss who's pretty easy. He just randomly throws rocks and doesn't do much else. A few well-timed bombs and he'll be down. Bosses in Alundra have quite a lot of health, so it does take a while. Matrix Software did the honorable thing and ignored the usual 3 hits and down trope. Once he's done, our Scandinavian spirit will bless you with gifts and tell you about the 7 crests, which you need to break down Melzas' barrier in order to take him on. He also rewards you with magic. Yeah, you get 1 magic crystal which allows you to use magic once, and gives you your first magic attack, the power of the earth. And of course, he gives you his personal crest, which kind of just looks like a polished fingernail. Nice. Well, now you know your true goal. Up to this point, you've not really been sure what the whole point of you being there is. Sure, you know you want to help people, but now you have something to strive for. 7 crests. This is when Alundra sets off, and I think it's a pity that many people may have given up by this point due to a couple of puzzles beforehand. But don't you worry, it doesn't ease up. In fact, compared to the later dungeons, this is baby's business. After you head back to the village, you may hear more people falling into nightmarish dreams. Firstly, Bonaire, and then Nadia, who around the village is known as Ms. Dynamite. Not because she's laying down some sick hip-hop beats, but the fact that she just blows shit up when she goes to sleep. Just look at her table. They didn't even bother fixing it. Anyways, you have to go and help them, right? So, where the freak do they live? Obviously, you may own a map which came with the game back in the day, but hey, who's got time for that when booting up a ROM? While playing, I did notice a little touch for the first time. I must have played Alundra a dozen times. Never completing it, mind. But only did I just notice these crows perched on top of houses of those who are currently in peril or are doomed to be so. Yeah, it's a nice waypoint marker without taking you out of the game. It's environmental help, even if it took me 20 years to notice. Crows are a sign of sorrow, looming evil, bad omens in general, and if you didn't know that, these ones have laser eyes to really drive home that point. First, you have to delve into Bonaire's dream, since Nadia won't do jack until she can see him and tell him her true feelings. Why she would like Bonaire though is anybody's guess, but Working Design, the translation team, they really went to town on this guy. They basically made a normal guy into a pot-smoking surfer dude, which, you know, is fine, but is this really the place for a druggy wave rider? I don't know, it just doesn't fit the tone. It's fun what they did with him, but it takes a lot out of the seriousness of the current events. You're trying to save him in his dream, but it's just pure comedy. This Sarah babe is a succubus calling him towards her, and high or not, any dude is gonna follow that lady. She's the kind of girl who appeared in the early 90s exercise videos wearing garish but quite sexy spandex. Yeah, I'd follow her too. This is a mini dungeon that's not incredibly complex, but requires a bit of backtracking to hit the right switches and making sure everything aligns correctly. It took a few attempts for me to make everything fall into place, but it's cool. Unfortunately, the babe of babes, Sarah, turns out to be this ancient monster goblin thing, which even when times are desperate and a few bevies have gone down, even I'd probably pass upon. This boss doesn't take too many hits to go down, but it's bleeding hard to hit. She or he or it's whatever. It isn't too difficult, but I will fully admit to my first death here. Alundra is not a forgiving game, and there are 0 checkpoints whatsoever. If you die, you reload your last save no matter the situation, and save points are very few and far between. There's only one save point in each dungeon around the midway point, so you have to be very careful. If you die in a boss, you're likely going to have to redo a handful of ball-busting puzzles, unless you backtrack and save once in a while, which is a fair tactic. You should do that. Be prepared to spend at least 45 minutes between save points. So, while I don't advise using save states frequently, if you need to pick up your nan from the line dancing club at 8 PM and don't want to leave your computer on, then fill your boots. Or if there's some random bullshit that's not a challenge, but is meant to be super annoying, which I will get to later on, then fine. But seriously, play through the pain. It feels so much better when you do it without cheesing the save states, I promise. With the totally righteous surfer dude saved, you go to the Awakened realm and you want to save Nadia next. Why she's fallen in love with this stone layabout, God only knows, but sadly we will never find out because she passes away. Yeah, she's dead. You were too late. That's pretty harsh. Just this sweet innocent lass who in any other game would have been saved and had a happy ending. Here she's just dead. And that's kind of how Alundra's story goes. This is a dark game with a refreshingly dark story. It's not edgy, it's not trying too hard, it's just very brutal in its story aspects throughout. It's something that I'll keep bringing up, but Zelda ain't got nothing on this in terms of story and its mature themes. But hey, you save Bonaire, which could be a good thing or bad thing depending on your preference for the reefer. As you wake up the next day from your half failure, you hear the slams of the blacksmith's hammer pounding away. Jess is downstairs with a new tool in his workshop, a flail. There's an awkwardness in the air as Jess admits that with each death in the village, he becomes more inspired to create weapons to aid Alundra's quest. When both my nans passed away, I whipped up the finest medieval mace you've ever seen. And this is an interesting theme of the story, at least what we're told initially. Long ago the people worshipped gods, but the king of the land ordered the destruction of their statues and banished their worship. When the people stopped worshipping, they lost their creativity. Which is an interesting take considering nothing stopped the advancement of the human race like religion. But there's a fulfilling twist here that we'll come to later on, I'm sure. This flail is awesome, I love it. For a start, it's more powerful, and those annoying early enemies die much quicker. But the range is brilliant too, keeping foes at bay is great. And I have to say, I would friggin' love a Castlevania game like this. If Castlevania went top down, then it should definitely be like this. After consulting with Sybil, she prophesizes that you are in a desert surrounded by sand, which means it's time for your biggest adventure yet. After heading eastward, you'll end up in a sandstorm desert. Your movement is what some may call treacle-like. I kind of hate it. If you fumble around this place, you may notice you can jump properly if you're on firm land like this. You'll find a cave that has a key item called the Sand Cape, which I'm sure you can all guess what it does. You delve into sand, allowing you to squeeze under tight gaps. Once you manage to reach the center, you'll be blown off to another section, which may be easy to get lost in if you didn't pay attention 20 minutes ago to Sybil's advice. Yeah, pay attention to what everyone has to say, literally everyone, because it's probably important. Follow the wind. Even then, the tricky platforming rears its head, where you'll second guess yourself as to whether it's actually possible to complete or not. But after about 1,000 tries, you will get there in the end. And welcome to the Ancient Shrine Dungeon. Yes, this is just the start of the actual dungeon. You basically just played the prologue to this. It is a long one, but not the longest by any means. This one is very open-ended. You basically have to find 4 statues, pay respect to them, in order to open up the second part of the dungeon. This place is full of puzzles where you know exactly what to do, but actually putting them into practice is a whole other prospect. Like this one, where I've got to hit the switch which opens the door, but only for a limited amount of time. This is a puzzle that's as basic as they come, but when you combine the sand stopping you from jumping up, plus a less than generous time frame, it's actually quite difficult to pull off. You basically have to throw a barrel halfway, use that as a platform, which sounds easy, but it is definitely not. And here, once again, you will second guess yourself, thinking, is this the right thing to do? Yes it is, but you just can't pull it off. And this room, well, this room can quietly fuck off, because I spent 10 minutes here mostly doing the wrong thing. Firstly, I avoided bees because in another room they just kept respawning, so I didn't bother with them. Wrong. Kill them, then a barrel appears. Great, looks like I can use this as an extra platform to get over to the switch over there. I keep trying, the momentum and perspective makes it very difficult, and I'm doubting myself. I'm doubting myself because I was wrong, bloody hell. I was wrong, and I was an idiot. I've been taught before that you can use barrels to activate switches. You're supposed to lob it. Of course you are, you tool of a fook. But that's what Alundra does to you. It makes you doubt the obvious. God damn, I love this game. I do genuinely like this. It seems bizarre, and I don't generally like overly difficult games, but this one just does it for me. I like working my brain out, trying different methods, and eventually succeeding. However, this next room is perhaps the worst part of the entire game. Not because it's difficult, it's just spiteful. You can see there's a platform slightly higher that you can't jump on right now due to the sand, but if you have a few platforms to help you get over there, should be fine. Well, that switch in the middle will let a barrel drop into the holes, and you need to catch them. But 50% of them will be a spike ball that will hit you, and as far as I'm aware, this is completely random. You have no way of knowing where the barrel will land. This is bullshittery guesswork. And it's not the only time the game does this. Later on, after you've killed the boss, you're probably very low on health, the game asks you to do it again, you absolute wanker. And if you don't get the required amount of barrels within 5 or 6 times, the puzzle will spawn all 4 to have spike balls. So if you manage to get 2 barrels, but you take too long to get the last one, well, Jimmy, start again, horseshit. I love this game, but I would happily fart in the face of anyone involved in this part of the game. Eventually you'll get to some worshippers in this shrine, and the leader wants to test you one more time. Sure, you've just killed a giant boss, but that ain't enough. You've got 8 rather tough enemies to take down. These are littered throughout this dungeon, and they take an age to beat down with weapons. My preferred method is to throw a bomb, which kills them in 1, and use that flail to keep them in place. That is so satisfying. It's actually not that difficult overall. Once that's over, you don't get anything vastly important in terms of story relation. You get some smelly old boots, which allows you to walk properly over sand. Those would have been useful before the dungeon. You also get a brand new sword, which I'm kind of sad about because I friggin' love the flail, and I want to live out my inner Castlevania forever. Now that That was an absolute marathon. From the start of Sybil telling me about the sand to picking up those second-hand smelly boots, that was an hour and 50 minutes. Constant, interesting platforming, fun puzzles, ball-aching puzzles, new discoveries, new items, tough battles with monsters, and a fair sprinkling of bullshit. That was an epic test of endurance, and I definitely need to have a rest, so let's take a break. I'm gonna go make a coffee. Are you back? Well, we need to take a trip to the beach. No, we're not going on holiday, we need to find some more crests. And apparently, the tide has gone out, leaving the entrance to the coastal cave, our next dungeon, open. This is a nice dungeon with a perfect mix of challenge. It's not easy by any means, but it's the right amount of tough that you can probably do it without having to pause for 20 minutes to have a long, hard look at yourself. Well, except the bit where I died and lost an hour. Yeah, the save point for this one isn't too convenient. I like these unique puzzles, such as this one with the spinning balls on chains. You have to destroy them at the right time to fling the ball to make a platform for you to jump over. Don't get me wrong, it makes you want to rip your balls off after trying for the 30th time, having to exit the room to reset the puzzles, which I'll fully admit is one of the bigger flaws of this game. Puzzles never reset, no matter how big or small. If you mess up, you have to leave the room and start again. It's not an issue for many of them, but for some of the bigger puzzles where you're currently deep into solving them, going back out, going back in can be a big pain in the arse. But I do respect the fact that it never breaks this rule. It's a rule and you've got to live with it. Like this swimming bit here. I have to swim all the way here, avoiding the hazards, pick up this log and throw it into the right place to make an extra platform. That's if you don't drop it like a complete Mr. Bean. I'd have to go all the way back to do it again. Alundra is a 30-hour game. At least 15 of those is you fucking up, resetting a room and trying again. As I've said, it's frustrating, but my god does it build character and makes it all sweeter when you succeed. The boss for this one is an absolute monster. Oh man, he was really difficult for me. The game becomes a borderline bullet hell shooter for a few moments. I actually died quite a bit on this dude. He's well hard compared to anything you've faced up to this point. He doesn't pop up often, he has tons of life and spams attack like it's 5 to 5 on a Friday and he's got a deadline to meet. I highly advise the charge attack with your new fangled upgraded sword. Once he's put to the seabed, you'll meet up with Vul, who's Lars' brother from another mother. He states that you're a bit too late since the monkeys have already stolen this crest. Well, that was a magnificent waste of time and my cognitive power. I don't have a whole lot up there, so I haven't got a lot to waste. Thanks. Anyways, yes, you may remember the moment when the Monkey King told his peons that they already had 2 crests. Well, this is one of them. Though considering this cave was flooded about half an hour ago, I'm giving full thumbs up to those monkeys. I didn't know they could swim. Great stuff. You get your rewards, rather comically an empty chest falls from the sky. I don't know why, that just made me giggle. I don't know if that comedy is intentional or not, but I love it. I like how they just left this one as though the monkeys didn't want the water magic that you also just got, which by the way, is a lifesaver literally because it can heal you. Never mind, back to the village we go. Looks like we have to deal with those simians at some point to nab those 2 crests. Back at the village, you'll hear the news of an old acquaintance arriving, someone of the same kin as yourself, Meia. Meia is you if you had a fondness for pink. She has the same power as you and has already saved one of the villagers while you were away, but she comes with a warning. She's against Alundra using his power, thinking he's too reckless and there's no point saving people if they're having a nightmare. Septimus is on your side though, and they have a bit of an argy-bargy, definitely some sexual tension within the air. Back to snoozing, and you're woken up in the middle of the night by Kline. Another burly bloke you wake up to in bed. I'm starting to think it's Alundra with the kink. He is obviously not himself, and you'll hear rumours from the villagers, one of whom says that he's seen Kline eating birds raw. Yummy. You'll try and catch up with him as he flees, and I have to say, this moment during the evening, no matter that there's a potential werewolf on the prowl, it's just lovely. I don't know if they're fireflies or whatever, but it is a very beautiful twinkling away in the late evening. Really love the atmosphere here. Eventually, you'll head into Kline's dream where he's busy sleeping, despite Meia protesting. This is a great dungeon, absolutely love it. The enemies aren't tough, and the puzzles aren't completely skill-based, it's mostly thought-based. You sit back and ponder how to solve the puzzles, at your own pace and not against the clock, nor any precision jumping. Well, at least for the most part. Now, I know a lot of people hate these ice pillar puzzles, but I friggin' love them because they're not as simple as most games make them out to be. There are a handful in this dungeon, but one of them is so fiendish, you're going to be breaking out the equation paper trying to figure out how the frig to do it. This is my favorite dungeon thus far, mainly due to the low threat puzzles alongside the atmosphere. Really very nice. The outside is beautiful and snowy, and the music is just perfect. It's a short, simple melody that really enhances the feeling of this place. Love it. There are two bosses here, one of which is basically Kirby if he was present in Chernobyl in 1986, sucking you and Kline in. Yes, Kline can get hurt too, which actually damages your health. Not sure how fair that is. Once you've hurt him enough, you'll be whipped out of the dream due to Kline going apeshit and transforming into the very werewolf, which concludes with a super easy boss fight and Kline's death. Everyone is looking on. It's quite a poignant moment where everyone is sad, in disbelief. The village's greatest warrior is dead, right in front of their eyes. But there's only one thing in my eyes: Jess making a badass new weapon. Oh yeah, you wake up to the sweet sound, not of birds chirping, or the sounds of children playing and laughing, but of Jess slamming away at metal. You can almost taste the carnage about to be caused by the brand new bow. Oh hell yes, we're getting full Zelda right now. Actually, it's definitely worth exploring the world map at this point, probably even beforehand, since there's lots of secrets and places to uncover. Mostly Gilded Falcons, which you can exchange for really nice equipment, and also life increasing items, both very, very useful, and seriously don't miss them. By the way, did you know that there is a fast travel system in Alundra? No, I didn't either, since for the first time in how many times I've played this, I stumbled across the most obscure side quest of all time, which unlocks the warp points. I also walked up to this massive structure, which will be important later on, but I did notice one very odd thing: the music. Just listen to this music. We both hear that, right? That is the boot up sequence to the PlayStation. It is. And they put it in a music track that definitely feels off. I'm sure this is intentional, but there is an uneasy vibe that surrounds this place purely down to the music. But we'll get back to this place later on because we've got a plot to follow. Anyways, time to go hunting some lizards. The next dungeon is called the Reptile's Lair, and it's very different from the kind that we've encountered thus far, because while there are puzzles to be solved, this is like 90% combat. Never-ending combat with a bunch of badass lizards. Some have swords, some have spears, some like to puke on you. It's a valid weapon of choice. Nothing says get out of my lair like a bath to the face. And I mean, it is never-ending, finding new ways in order to get you overwhelmed by these aggressive foes. If you're not one for using your noggin, then you'll probably enjoy this dungeon the most. If you do enjoy the brain teasers, then there's a good chance that this dungeon will be rather tedious to you. No less so with the boss fight, which was an absolute marathon. Just a giant stomping lizard with endless minions protecting him. He's really easy to hit, but when his health is low, he heals himself. So the final push, you cannot let up whatsoever. I had to try 3 times with this big grey bastard. But once you do, you get more magic. Huzzah! And a sapphire crest, which sadly doesn't look like a fingernail. Never mind. Was hoping for at least one full hand. There's still a chance though. When you make your way back to the village, you're told that good old Giles has fallen asleep with the nightmare starting to take him away. Meia declines to help. To be fair with Giles, I'm on her side and I don't think I need to explain why. It's called Giles. Way too middle class for me. So what if he hates you and called you a demon while he wafted a Bible in your face? Oh well, I'm getting over my middle class prejudice to save his hateful ass. This is not a particularly taxing dungeon and adds a few new touches too. There's always something a bit different and perhaps a new take on a puzzle stuff that we've learned before. The boss sucks absolute balls though, mainly because it's Chernobyl Kirby once again, but even harder, like way harder. Because good old Giles is plodding around like a melon, and if he gets sucked in, it's instant game over. I genuinely don't know if there's a graceful way to do this boss, but if there is, please let me know, because my technique was literally just me jumping into the gaping mouth, sacrificing my health so good old Giles didn't take a hit. This took way too many tries for my liking. I did not like this boss. But with Giles saved, it's time to tell the rest of the village he's alive. They're off praying at an altar up north. When you do so, I would hope now most of the population believe that you're here for good reasons rather than bringing misery upon them. Jess tells you to be wary of the fissure in the north of this room, and be sure not to go wandering in there. Wink, wink, wink. Thanks for telling me where to go next, Jesse boy. The next dungeon is kind of excruciating, mostly in a good way, sometimes in a oh my god I want to rip off my balls kind of way. The theme is dark and light. Many of the puzzles involve lighting up a room with painfully fragile torches, either by lighting larger torches or burning the shit out of grass to open up paths. And yes, before I make the joke about how leaves don't really burn, I won't. I think I learned my lesson when I reviewed Record of Lord of War. I made that joke and people lost their shit. Either ironically freaking out, trying to pedantly explain how they actually could, or genuinely being angry at me due to some, I don't know, mental instability. Don't worry, I won't be putting a lighter to a leaf for 2 seconds anymore. Anyways, this is quite a challenging dungeon to pull off, as it is quite demanding, but I love how Alundra rinses this gimmick so much, but without it being overbearing. I've already made the examples of burning the bramble, I can almost smell the blackberry pie, but avoiding water drops, lobbing them from great heights, carrying them through spikes, which fucked me right off absolutely no end. Yeah, look, I make a case for enjoying the platforming here, but I can't defend it here. This is less defendable than... There's even a clever one where you have to make the fire-breathing turtles burn the bushes for you, which would have been easier had I not murdered all but one of them before realizing this fact. It does play with your expectations quite a lot. Usually when you see an enemy, you've been trained, murder quickly. Because the majority of the time they're going to be a pain in your ass. But here, you have to exploit them. And then as thanks, you literally do have to murder them so you can activate the lift. Use them and then knock them down, my personal advice to any CEO out there. The boss is quite fun though, it's not too difficult. I managed to do it with very few recovery items. It takes time to take off its armor and then whack its head, but it is a fun one. I quite enjoyed this one. With that boss done, it's time to meet the Guardian and get your latest crest, which happens to be the second one stolen by the monkeys. Couldn't she have just popped up at the beginning of the dungeon and told me, hang on a minute, don't waste your time? But no, you do get an extra prize, which I've got to be honest, unless it's a flamethrower or something that turns my flail into a ball of fire, I'm still going to be pissed off. Oh, it's some magic. Whoop-de-doo! When you awaken back at home, Septimus tells you that Meia has a theory as to why the villagers are having nightmares, so it's time to go find that lady. She basically tells you exactly that. So now you better confront Ronan, the priest, in his sanctuary. You and Septimus break in to find it empty, but there are plenty of secrets around and suspicious things. This is sort of a mini dungeon. It's very small, only a handful of rooms, but it's all one big puzzle pretty much. There are also 0 fights. Yes, none at all. This is a combat-free zone, and it feels very nice. Not that there's anything wrong with the battles in Alundra, but it does bring a welcome change of pace. The puzzles themselves are well done, not too difficult, except for me chasing this book around like a moron, thinking I had to do it in the right order in a certain amount of time, or only jump along the coffins. Nothing seemed to work until I thought, just ask Septimus, and yeah, he says he'll go help you. Thanks! You confront Ronan in the basement. Now, I've played video games. You come across a bad guy deep down inside his lair. There's a huge open space and some devil worship on the wall. I'm sitting here ready for this guy to turn into some laser-breathing dragon. But no, you talk to him. He says, yeah, I worship the Antichrist. And you're like, well, yeah, alright, then see you later. You piss off back to town. You wake up to the sound of Jess hammering away once again, which is unusual since no one died. Or did they? You get the power glove. It's so bad. Yes, now you can play Rad Racer as a mini game. Well, no, you actually can't, but you can lift up heavy things. So why would he create this masterpiece? Well, it turns out that someone did die. Sybil. Yes, our future predicting laser beam eyes girl is dead. The sad music kicks in, which really sells the scene. And she's really quite an innocent girl, and extremely useful for the adventure, maybe too useful for some out there. It turns out someone snapped her neck during the night, and a mysterious figure that looks like Ronan scarpers away. And someone even tells you that. So yeah, your inaction with Ronan's mission costs this girl her life. That's messed up. Once again, you pay your respect, and Septimus has the idea of you jumping into Meia's dream to test whether she's truly a friend or foe. So that's exactly what you do. Delve right in there for a dungeon that once again is all about the puzzles. There's no battling whatsoever. Again, it's pretty chill. Although any puzzle that involves flaming torches and jumping on tiny platforms, well, one may say it's a form of torture. No, seriously. They are painful and being tortured by the tortures. With each puzzle solved, you'll see a bit of background about Meia, and you'll see all the crap she's been through in her life. Her mother, a god worshipper, was burnt at the stake when she was young, and Meia herself had to escape for her life. Eventually, she discovers her powers and winds up here in this village, vowing to destroy Melzas once and for all, blaming him for her predicaments. You know she's on your side. Afterwards, you're both warmed up to each other, not that she knows you've been in her dream, but perhaps you managing to save Giles made her less stubborn in her original opinion. We're pointed in the direction of where to go next, but if we go straight there, you won't be able to advance due to an ominous... baskets? I don't know what it is, but you need something. After visiting an old man called Navas, you're given a magical bean sprout, the greatest weapon of them all. Sadly, you can't flick beans at goblins, but you need to use them to make springy platforms, which will allow you to make your way through a tricky platforming section all the way back up to the big giant statue which plays the PlayStation startup music. But before that, it's time to do a bit more exploring. It's something I've neglected quite a bit, but this is where it gets serious, since now you have access to almost any place, and there's quite a lot of good shit to commandeer. Like this fire rod, baby. Woohoo! Burn, baby, burn. Now you've got a fire wand, it pretty much negates any negatives this game may have. Perfection. Especially since you can spam it to your heart's content, it doesn't even have any magical points or anything. Just use it, whatever. I always feel nervous about using them in Zelda games, like it feels like I shouldn't use it just in case, you know what I mean? In Alundra, well, everyone's gonna get a bit crispy. This is the real dungeon. It's full of midgets, and no, that's not offensive, that's what they call themselves, and I respect that. They are the protectors of this giant erection. No, that's not what they call it, I just find it funny. This is full of pain in the arse heads that spit fire out, but it's a fun dungeon overall, aside from this one bit which is genuinely one of the most terrifying things you'll encounter because, as Alundra likes to do from time to time, it goes against your expectations. If you don't die from this the first time around, I salute you, because you'll probably end up panicking and then crying when you can't seem to damage the stone heads like before. Half a dozen of them spewing out homing fireballs. And don't forget that Bobby Big Bollocks in the middle who seem to develop a penchant for devastating laser beams. The trick here is that you need to kill them in order. only one of them will be able to be damaged at a time, which, if you're like me and are panicked to shittery, it may not be so obvious. And even then, knowing what you need to do, dodging everything is not easy. This bit also plays with you a never-ending spawn of really tough enemies. I say tough, a bomb takes care of them pretty easy, like everything in this game, but in such an enclosed space, no time to figure out exactly what to do. Do you keep killing them till enough is enough? Can you hit this switch? No, that doesn't seem to work. It's just endless. For a bit of a breather, I go outside the room before heading back in. The midgets once again are about to unleash the monsters upon you, but this time they hit the wrong switch, which makes a staircase for you instead of spawning the monsters. Do I love it? Do I hate it? I don't know, but I like the fact that it does what the hell it wants. It's not afraid to go outside the boundaries. It's certainly not boring or predictable. It turns out that the boss isn't really a bad guy after all. He was once a god worshipped by people who has since lost most of his powers as the prayers stopped coming. He probably should have thought harder about his tithe rates. I heard he bumped it up to 15%. They abandoned him after that. Not surprised. 15%. Madness. So we grabbed the next crest, we're gifted the Aqua Cape, so we can cosplay Aquaman at the next Comic-Con, and one of the so-called midgets apologizes for hindering your progress and trying to murder you, and gives you some cash. That's kind of adorable. With this nice new cape, it's time to go and make its only real use as far as I know. But first, a quick stop off at the Ice Manor. I already picked up the Fire Wand at the Fire Manor, and during my time I also came across this place, but I genuinely had no idea how to get in. But this time, I was determined, and this is the Ice Manor. Yes, this is like being bathed in honey and milk for me. Having my nipples rubbed. Push these there columns around, get that there ice wand. Nice. It's not as cool as throwing fireballs, but I'll take it. Anyways, back to the Aqua Cape. This very manly dungeon called the Fairy Pond, or as I typoed it in my video file, Fairy Pong. Those fairies can let rip if they want to. This place has you jumping around underwater a lot. You jump way higher and way slower. A fairly unique twist to make this small dungeon stand out. But the real reason you'll want to stay here is for this badass sword. Yes, I just got the Fiend Blade, which makes any enemies you fought up to this point look like they're made of butter. Back to the story though, and you and Meia have decided to confront Ronan. You know he's a bad dude and you want to stop him. Firstly by destroying the Melza statue in his basement. When you go there though, he tells you to bugger off, saying that everyone knows about the statue already and it's meaningless. Everyone has prayed to Melza's willingly. Is this a weird twist? Like really? Jess praying to a demon? Sybil prayed? Is this some Hot Fuzz Wickman sort of crap? And with that, once again, you just walk away from him. What the frick? This is borderline infuriating. You know he's bad. You know he killed Sybil. And this is the second time you've let him go. And you wake up in the morning and Jess is dead. You tool. Alundra, you utter smeghead. Killed by Ronan, no doubt. And yet here he is, there at the funeral. This is nuts. Why doesn't Alundra just pull out his sword and skewer the bastard? This is a weird part that just doesn't make sense to me. It's horrible that Jess has been killed, but the whole situation, it's wrong. There's a long scene that just makes you angry. One by one, people paid their respects and Ronan just standing there, presiding over the funeral. What? When you arrive back in, well, I guess it's your home now, you finally open the chest that's been teasing you the past 20 hours and it's a rusty piece of armor. But don't you worry because it's a fine piece of wear that when you spruce up a bit, it might be pretty useful. If only we knew a blacksmith around here. After fanning about a bit, I say a bit, like 1 hour just wandering around, I came across this house that I completely missed on my first journey to the desert. It's just another shop, thank God, because I was starting to question the purpose of money in this game outside the casino. Oh yeah, there is a casino by the way, and for all intents and purposes, it can burn in hell. There's 3 minigames here and all of the bullshit variety. Well, if you actually want to complete them. I didn't. I checked out after a few tries of each, and yes, this seems to be where the majority of your hard-earned cash will go into if you want to 100% the game, which I don't want to because it's not really worth it from what I searched online. Anyways, back to this new shop. This dude sells some armor upgrades. So yeah, I played 75% of this game with the base armor. Pretty badass. Give me that though. But it'll also fix up Jess's armor for 2 grand, you greedy son of a... Yeah, I'm a bit short right now, so I'll just rock the leather armor for the time being. Although, I didn't know at this point, I only found out later on, that if you jump through his chimney, then he'll do it for free. Yeah, I didn't know that until like almost the end of the game. But anyways, regardless, it's now time to delve into another sleeping villager. This time it'sElen, who, if you've been playing right up to this point by talking to everyone at every major event, you'll know that she's a young girl with an alcoholic, depressed father, and she has a multiple personality disorder. It's a very sad family indeed. Her father begs you to help her, and he'll even give up the booze if she survives. Meia is already there trying to help, but she says she can't due toElen having multiple personalities. Apparently a symptom is Dreamwalker resistance, but maybe if you enter together, you can do it. It's at this point, I just felt exhausted. I absolutely love this game, but before dropping into Elen's dream, take a break. Take a few days off. Come back fresh, revitalized. After playing for a large portion of time, recording about 5 hours worth at a time, the culmination of what Elen's dream brought to the table really made me need to take a break halfway through, because this is very peculiar, it's non-linear, full to the brim with a little bit of everything. Tough foes, really brain-busting puzzles. Puzzles that are easy, but you think too much and then you hate yourself for not realizing the solution. This puzzle area made me go nuts. The solution is fantastic. You'll feel like a freaking genius when you've worked it out. But I couldn't seem to get out of the place when I'd done it. I couldn't get past these columns. I couldn't push them. There was no other transporter. And just trying and attempting was torturous due to the slippy floor, annoying clipping on the columns, really tough enemies, and having 2 floors to search literally drove me nuts. I thought I was stuck until... You just break them. You just break them. You break them. You just break them. You just break them. I checked out. It exhausted me. And I said it's non-linear because you have 4 crystals to destroy, but the order of which you do them is based on a roulette of sorts. You'll start with different ones and do them in different orders depending on the timing. And there's multiple boss battles too. Yeah, you have to fight that goddamn giant slime 3 times in different circumstances depending on which color crystal you're currently on. If you're on purple, you have to fight him while slipping around on ice. Another color may have him around lava that you need to dodge. It's not a bad dungeon by any means, it's just very long and has a very confusing progression. Sure, Alundra keeps me in a permanent state of confusion with its puzzles, but here, it just felt like too much. Too many dead ends and false leads. This was the point I almost caved in to look at a guide. What is great though is Meia, since you do have to work together to get through this dungeon. Not all of the time, she seems to pick her moments not to show up, but I do like this working together act, and it should have happened more often in my opinion. Plus, once you successfully rescueElen, Gustav exchanges your old flail for a spiky one, which does a fancy charge attack. Sadly, aside from some puzzle parts where it's required, it's kinda useless at this point. I'd rather use my magic wands than the flail if I'm going for distance, and if I need power, I got a pretty sweet sword, so it's kinda bittersweet to not need it so much. You're woken up in the middle of the night to Kisha just walking into your room. Sadly, it's not a booty call, now she's thrown away her religion. Those are always the wild ones, but in fact her brother Giles has been taken by a nightmare yet again. But before you jump in to help him, Meia, being slightly more bright than Alundra, theorizes about what's going on a bit more. When people have nightmares, they become afraid. When they're afraid, they pray to God. When they pray, God gains more power and control over them. Now Alundra has arrived, people have stopped praying because they're not afraid anymore. So this dream could be a trap to kill Alundra, so people have to resort to fear and prayer once more. A cunning plan. But before you can decide what you should do about it, you hear the sound of cute monkeys outside. The Murggs have entered the village, hoping to catch Alundra mid-dream walk to kill him. You go outside, spank the monkeys, but before you can go back to save Giles, he's become a werewolf too. This dude just can't catch a break, although I bet he's still middle class enough to still eat avocado instead of humans. No doubt he's having some inner turmoil about the thought of avocado, and Giles fights the werewolf, casting him out, but also sacrificing himself at the same time. He'd rather die a human than a beast. I know I've taken the piss out of him for being middle class, but Giles is actually one of the more tragic characters here because he was so religious and worshipped God more than others even when he wasn't afraid, and that made him more vulnerable to be used by Melzas as a tool. He was a good man who was unintentionally used by the dark forces because of him being so pious. His goodness was used against him. The morning after, it's time to get revenge on those monkeys. Meia hands you the key to their lair, pretty much. Apparently one of the goons last night was carrying it. Let's get it on. But first, to stop off and talk to some residents, which this time includes my second favourite and equally least favourite line in the entire game. Good old Bonaire, being the wise brother he is, states, "The faith of a few and a little weed is all we need, bro." I love it. And I hate it. It's funny dumb, but come on, working design. Maybe here wasn't the time or place. I'll get to my number one in the not too distant future. As the game likes to do from time to time, the Murgg dungeon is separated into two, kind of like a prologue part and then the main bit. So the first part of the dungeon is actually to get inside the proper dungeon. The first part is actually tougher than the main part, mainly down to this section here where you have to connect the bridge, but only if you do a certain combination of switches, which is usually pretty easy, but the pain in the arse here is that the switches are far apart. At least access to them is, with teleports coming out of your arse. I finally did it, but then I forgot which one leads to the actual start of the bridge to finally cross over. It's a mind-mangling maze of tangled roots which suits the theme of the tangled bushes you need to burn to a crisp. And what happens when you finally get to the main dungeon? You instantly get captured, and Alundra just takes it. You've literally murdered 100 monkeys to get to this point, but here, 3 of them, they pincer you, you just give up. I think Alundra is just tired of this shit now. It's been going on for 20 odd hours and he's like, yeah, monkey prison sounds good to me. Obviously, he's not going to take it, and he's breaking the shit out of this place. He's got a big, bad monkey to kill. In the cell next door, there is another prisoner, which, lucky for us, he's a locksmith, who'll no doubt come in handy later on. This Murgg tree isn't particularly tough. There's not much in the way of brain-busting puzzles, but the biggest criminal here is backtracking, since you'll need the locksmith to help you out a few times, but you need to keep going back to get him. It's not a big deal, and although you may get lost in the branches of the tree, you'll eventually get to Zazan, which is the perfect name for a helicopter monkey. He's actually surprisingly easy, as long as you keep your distance. I think this is a point where I genuinely fell in love with the fire wand and realized, yeah, it's not powerful, but I'm a goddamn coward, so if I can keep my distance and still do a decent enough damage, I'm gonna do it. Oh, and yes, there's the bow, but it's really, really weak, and when you're that far away, it's hard to become accurate when you've got a giant monkey on crack cocaine. Oh, and by the way, this is the giant monkey that wasted your goddamn time in not 1, but 2 dungeons. Yeah, they thieved 2 of the crests, so you're gonna burn this mother down. You can't get those 3 hours back, and it won't cover the therapy cost, but a monkey on fire, it's a start. When you come back victorious, you're told of an eruption in Mount Torla, which sounds like a place that hides treasure, maybe a crest. So off there we go for a lava-filled adventure. You definitely need the ice wand here. Not gonna lie about this, the toughest part of the dungeon for me was the entrance. I literally didn't know how to get inside the dungeon. And once again, Alundra decided to play with me because it presents those goddamn columns again and torches to flame up, but I couldn't understand how to open the second gate. So me, way overthinking it, was trying to push these columns around the room like a fucking moron, when actually what you need to do is only light one of the fires, not both of them, you absolute tool, Jordan. Actually, it does present some tough platforming sections. The lava doesn't help either, what with the game's weird take on collision detection. The interesting part is these fireballs that jump up like you're in Bowser's castle. You can freeze these with the wand and then use them as platforms. It takes much timing and much patience to use them as stairs. You'll notice that I'm panicking and jumping as fast as I can, but at this point I didn't realize that the one you're currently standing on won't melt until you jump off. I think this is literally the first merciful thing that Alundra has done. The boss for this one is Smaug. Actually, it's called something else that I can't remember right now. And he's one of the Guardians of Old. Even though you've collected tons of crests already, this dude isn't convinced you're the true releaser, so wants to test you. I don't know if there's a special technique for this guy. I know you can only use your ice wand, but avoiding his attacks, that's just hard as feck. This was one hell of a battle for me, and he gives you the Emerald Crest, while comically frozen like in some sort of cartoon, and then he blows up. At least his head does. Jesus Christ, have a nice slumber, mate. You're once again woken up from your sleep by Meia, who tells you that Burgess, one of the young kids, has been kidnapped by the Murggs. His twin brother cowers in fear. Septimus says they can find the location of the kidnapped child by delving into the twins' dreams because they are connected. You can enter the dream of one and exit out of the other, which, if real, could sort out long distance travel in no time. If I wanted to pop back to England from China just for my mum's Sunday dinner, just find a couple of Chinese twins. Send one to live with my mum. It'd be worth it. So yes, you jump into the final dream of the game, and it's also the most brain-busting of the lot of them, because there are two planes of existence, one for each of the twins. One is the complete mirror image of the other, which leads to some very tough but really logical puzzles. I have to admit though, I did come across a brick wall in my progression where I literally couldn't figure out where I should go next. I just randomly stumbled upon an open gate that I could have sworn was locked 5 minutes ago, but regardless, once you've defeated the boss or bosses, you'll be transported to the kidnapped boy who's in the Murgg tree. When you arrive back in the village, disaster has struck. The village is a raging inferno. Holy shit, the village is up in flames. Everywhere is wrecked. Obviously, you're going to be searching around, and just as Alundra likes to do, people are dead. Least of all, Bonaire, who, remember, a few minutes back I said that my least favourite and my most favourite line was coming. Well, ladies and gents, here is what Working Design thought was appropriate for a burning corpse in the middle of a catastrophe. I both love it and hate it. If this was in a game with a different tone, I would have pissed myself, but in this darkly game, and especially at this very moment, it's just weird. He's not the only dead person, you see Meia lying there. Also, once you've taken out the monkeys, you'll be in the Meia's house where the survivors are. You'll see that there are very few people left. Elene, Gustav's daughter, who you recently saved from a nightmare, she's perished. It's kind of heartbreaking, as you thought both father and daughter would both get their lives on track. In any other game, it would have been the alcoholic Gustav taking the fall, perhaps bravely fending the monkeys off, saving people in the process, having some kind of redemption, but no, it was his mentally ill child who perished. It's fucking harsh, guys. Mead, the twins' father, they die. Wendell, the old dude who was the first person you saved from a nightmare, dead. I like to think he was beating the shit out of monkeys with a stick while his family escaped, probably with their inheritance already in hand. It's time to have a council meeting as the flames ravage the town. This reminds me of the everything is fine meme, but I get it. The Murggs could come back anytime to finish what remains of the village. You, Meia, and the drunken Gustav can only do so much. Ronan pops in, but everyone is now in agreement. He's a bit of a shithouse. Everyone is now suddenly becoming an atheist. That's what can happen with some slightly heavy-handed preaching, like murdering half the population. That has an effect. There's a religious debate going on, but for Meia, it all finally fits into place. When people prayed, Melzas was strong, but the statues were ordered to be burned and people forbidden to worship. Melzas needed people to pray again, but if they prayed to a new god, what would happen to him? Well, he was afraid. He needed people to pray to him. At the end of it, people didn't lose their creativity. Melzas just went inside their heads and made them think they lost their creative output. But in response, the humans became able to control their dreams inadvertently, making them more powerful. Enough of a threat to Melzas, who needed to kill them to stop them becoming more powerful. Yeah, he's an evildoer who ballsed up and was trying to fix his mess. The next day, you wake up. The villagers will make their final decision. Give up or fight. But first, head to the shop where the lady will give you, finally, that sweet ass armor she didn't want to give you the whole game, as it's a family heirloom. Well, she'll give it to you now, as long as you promise not to scratch it, and it's free. Nice. Before the decision is made, it's time to finally take care of someone who should have died about 15 hours ago in-game, before Ronan can scupper the village anymore. You're going to put that priest where he belongs. Sadly, he doesn't transform into a dragon. Instead, he went to Chernobyl with Kirby. This isn't exactly a tough battle if you work out where to stand to avoid his most deadly attack. As I've always said in life, the best way to get rid of a mutated priest, good old fire wand. God, I friggin' love this one, and I don't care if it's like the most effective way or efficient way to take care of this monstrosity, but I goddamn love it. Once again, there's some sympathy for Ronan, who was again a tool used by Melzas, but is much less earned than Giles. Ronan, to me, he was a bad dude who was empowered by the evil rather than taken by it. I don't care what Meia says. Now taking shelter in the sanctuary, the villagers unite. After discussion, they come to a conclusion that they must use their powers together, unite into one dream to empower Alundra for his final fight. Together, they conjure a holy sword, the most powerful weapon you'll have up to this point and probably the entire game. Before you can take on Melzas, you need one more crest. I guess villagers are getting ahead of themselves, but luckily one of the outcasts of the village, the grave digger weirdo, approaches you and tells you he is different from the others. Alongside Navas, who gave you the gift of the bean, they were sent by the Guardians to watch over Melzas, obviously not doing a grand job in the process, but Navas has the final crest, so you have to go get him and enter the weirdest dungeon of them all. To get to him, you have to get through 14 rooms. Each room has 3 exits, which lead to one of the 14 rooms again. It seems almost random, but it's not. Firstly, you have to find the final room, which may take some time. You may end up visiting the same rooms over and over again in the process, maybe getting in a frustrating loop. But once you do, you'll find out that you need to hit a switch in every single room in this dungeon, which, considering the weird mapping here, is no mean feat. Tracking down every single one of them is really quite tough unless you bring out a pen and paper to make your own rudimentary map. You'll just choose doors at random and hope for the best. Fingers crossed you'll end up in a room that you've never seen before. You'll get to Navas, who is attacked by Zorgia, who killed the giant statue thing. He is a tough goblin, and his boss fight was one hell of a marathon from me. Always on the move, always having to avoid these homing wankers while still trying to take pot shots when he finally lands. It's been a while since my thumb felt this much pain. After getting the final crest, you have to put them on pedestals, if you can find them all, which will show you a cutscene where the lake shrine rises from, well, the lake. You better prepare for the final dungeon, and bloody hell, is it epic. Be prepared to spend about 3 hours in here. It's also made of 2 parts, the exterior walls where you need to figure out how to open the bloody door. I like how narrow this part is, it's just all sideways. The interior, however, is really something special. You have a quick cutscene with Melzas, who throws you out and seals the main door to his lair. You see 6 lamps light up, which you need to take out all of them to open up the door again. The switches are littered around this castle. What you have in store is a multi-layered, multifaceted, complex dungeon that culminates pretty much everything you've learned thus far into one. This dungeon is just great. It's actually not the most difficult one, it's pretty chill overall, with a big focus on puzzles that aren't so bad. Just very pleasing. From the start, there's this very eerie atmosphere. Everything is frozen in time, even the enemies. You're given hints about turning on the engines to make everything alive again. That's your first task overall. Even when everything is woken up, enemies don't require too much effort, but the puzzles, finding out how to get over there, solving small little puzzles to open doors, is just the best dungeon in my opinion. It's not the hardest, but it is the longest. It's certainly never boring due to the huge size, and the music is absolutely incredible. Very different to the usual music, led mostly by piano. It's a change of tone which indicates something serious and epic is going on. I specifically left this dungeon to do after I'd fell asleep, like in real life. I could have gone through this in the night before, but I really wanted to wake up, have a coffee by my side, and spend my morning completing Alundra, and it felt great. My wife and daughter still sleeping soundly while I'm trying not to let out a nuclear F-bomb with this test of jumping skills, and my god, I almost woke them up jumping for joy with pure elation when I finally did it. God, that was great. After the last couple of tricky switches that involve opening the way, then backtracking, you'll get to the final battle with Melzas. I say battle, it should be battle, since you've got three boss battles in a row. Yeah, 3 boss battles. One of them, pretty tough. One of them, surprisingly easy, and one of them is, fuck you game. First up, Melzas summons a big black dragon to try and take you down. The black dragon has similar vibes to Zorgia, as you wait for him to touch down before attacking. Thankfully this time there's no homing bastards coming at you. It's more a test of patience than anything. He can be hard to dodge, but don't worry about it too much, as after this fight you get fully healed by the villagers praying for you. Yes, they synergize their energy to also conjure up an instant revive. Wonder Essence, which I haven't really talked about up to this point, but since I've not got much time left to do so, why not? If you have one of these, if you die, you instantly get revived with full health and magic. It's basically cheat mode, a free extra life to cheat death, and they are very, very welcome. However, they are few and far between, so they don't actually break the game, but during boss battles especially, you will need them to make sure you get through the marathons that they can present themselves to be, because they are long and sap your health like a mother. With the black dragon taken down, it's time for Melzas himself. And I have to say, he's been pumping some iron in anticipation of this battle, I'm sure. Although he definitely forgot his abs, and that's messed up, man. His first battle is almost a joke. I say almost because I did get killed by him and used up my Wonder Essence, but once you realize he literally can't attack you if you're fast enough, it's just a matter of running his health down. But this is just a taster for what's to come. His final form, he quickly nips to Fukushima Bay Area to turn into something that definitely belongs in a horror movie. A giant, skinless head with detached eyes and hands. It is vile. And it's not only terrifying in appearance, but also in its bullshittery, because this thing has 3 attacks, each of which pretty much happens at the same time. You're avoiding getting body slammed by eyeballs, lasers are constantly raining down at you, and those hands, well, those are the worst hands in history, because if they grab you, and boy they will sap your entire health except for 1 gem, leaving you open for a 1-hit kill. Now you can heal with all the herbs in the world, all the potions and water magic you want, but that thing is gonna keep grabbing you, so you gotta take him out quickly. Somehow I did not die here. I blasted him with all the magic I could until he explodes. You're back in the room with Melzas on his knees, and you're told the only way to finish him off is with magical fire. Yes, the final blow with my favorite weapon in the game. It's like the devs knew. Melzas is gone, and there we have it. You hurry out of the collapsing castle, a favourite trope of mine. Alundra is done. That is the last control you have as a rather long anime cutscene begins. It's interesting and unexpected because, like the story as a whole, it's not exactly brimming with happiness. Sure, the surviving villagers are safe and you help rebuild their houses, but Meia and Alundra eventually feel the need to leave. You can see Alundra is constantly plagued by the memories of his adventure. He's haunted by them. It's pretty badass anime. You see him fighting the dragon, fighting Zorgia, and even the finishing blow to Melzas. But he's a broken man. Eventually, he decides that he needs to be alone for quite a bit, with Meia and Alundra parting ways. She's going to the happy, bright area, Alundra heading into a dark, dangerous road that I guess we'll never know what happened afterwards. The end credits roll, with Working Design taking the first billing, which, I don't know, I'm not a fan of that, to be honest. Be humble about the masterpiece that was put together by the actual developers. But I did enjoy the fact that they gave special thanks to Mountain Dew, which would explain some of their enthusiasm for taking liberties with the translation. And also they thanked Cindy before thanking Matrix. Come on, guys. They also thanked Scott Hunter. I don't know why they needed someone called Scott so badly, but I assume they did eventually hunt him down, otherwise they wouldn't have thanked the hunter. I wonder if Scott survived. Directed by Yasuhiro Ohori, who went on to direct the sequel, and then went on to have a more executive role at Matrix. The game design by Yasunaga Ayama, who spends most of his time these days drawing hentai online. Yes, I did find him, and yes, I did look at them, and yes, I did delete my browser history. Written by Ichiro Tezuka, who did a fine job murdering everyone, and everyone else involved in the production. What an amazing job you did. Alundra, for me, is a masterpiece. I know I've complained about various aspects and like bullshittery and stuff like that. The platforming, the perspective, they are flaws that to me don't diminish what is an incredible debut release for Matrix Software. Everything comes together so well, and you can see how much time and effort was put into this by genuinely talented people. Both designers, artists, programmers came together to create this wonderful game that, in my opinion, surpasses many of its inspirations. They made a game they wanted to make. You can tell they didn't consult focus groups, quality of life features. Like, who needs them? Just play the goddamn game, get on with it. Use your brain, use your skill, learn, become better. Will it frustrate? Yes. Will you feel great when you overcome it? God damn, yes you will. I've had more orgasms this week from playing Alundra than I have when my missus goes out to do some shopping. Alundra is very rarely a game that laughs at you. Sure, it has its moments, like guessing the falling crates and the goddamn casino, but when I say unforgiving, it just expects better of you. The puzzles aren't cheating you, you're just not thinking critically enough. For me, this is back in the day with games like Broken Sword or Monkey Island. When you got to a puzzle you couldn't quite figure out, what did me and my dad do? Well, we didn't go on the internet to complain about it. We paused the game, my dad made me a milky coffee, maybe even treated me to a pot noodle. And then we talked about it, we discussed it, we theorized. It was actually a great bonding session for both of us, who rarely talked much to each other. I can't imagine loving this game as much as I do if I just thought it was too hard and looked online for a solution. The devs even said that they wanted to give you that sense of satisfaction when you get past the difficult part. They didn't want things just to be handed to you. There's no experience points because the only experience they wanted was the experience the player earned themselves by playing the game and overcoming the obstacles, getting better, thinking better. It's very rarely cheap. It's fiendish but clever. So clever, I almost think it's a fever dream because games just aren't made like this anymore, even now or before Alundra. I guarantee you that anyone who's completed Alundra, their first thought is going to be asking online games like Alundra. Unfortunately, I don't think there are any. Alundra has gone all out, zero compromise. They set out to make their dream game, and I'm pretty sure they took as long as they needed. 3 years in fact, which back then was quite a long time for a game development. They wanted to make an impact with their debut, and my god, they did. That's why I find it hard to understand how Matrix Software didn't go on to be one of the all-time great developers. After Alundra 1, they made a couple of more games, and then Alundra 2 arrived 2 years after. Then, 3 years later, a game called Dual Hearts, which I've never played since it didn't release in Europe, but many have said it's a spiritual successor to Alundra. I'm sure I'll talk about those two games later on down the line, but after that, it's just hard to understand what happened. These obviously very, very talented designers going on to be basically devs for hire. Mercenaries working for bigger publishers on their franchises, like porting Final Fantasy games to mobile, making the sequel to Lost in Blue. They did develop the Final Fantasy 3 and 4 remakes on DS for Square, which is a big deal, but that's hardly letting them go to town with their own ideas and designs. They forewent their creativity for sensible business, as times got tougher for mid-sized studios. I understand, okay, I do understand why they haven't focused on their own IPs, but I would really have loved to have seen what they could have become. I massively hope that Alundra can come back one day, with the same key members, because I genuinely believe there is a place for it this day and age. If we like Dark Souls, you're gonna friggin' love Alundra. We currently live in a world where indie Zelda lights usually come in at around 6 hours or so of playtime. Alundra, it's a proper adventure, a genuine experience that most modern games can't do, at least not willing to do. They don't have a patient publisher, or they need to put food on the table for their families to get the game out in not 3 years. You know, I get it. It's just, I wish we could. I wish we could. This came out in the very same year as The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, which is rightly regarded as one of the best games of all time. Friggin' love it. I love pretty much every Zelda. It is important though, because Alundra and Ocarina share a lot in common. They both play off the same formula, the same kind of gameplay pretty much. In fact, despite the 2D, 3D difference, I'd say Alundra has more in common with the N64 classic than it does, say, A Link to the Past. Alundra feels like a 3D game made within 2D restrictions. I mean, only madmen would have made Alundra in 2D rather than 3D, but my god am I glad that they did. What with the heavy platforming elements. When Ocarina of Time came out with its amazing 3D graphics on a console, I think people forgot Alundra almost instantly. They didn't print a whole lot of them, and despite being critically acclaimed, perhaps they didn't feel it could compete with more modern looking games in terms of sales. I think Alundra is better than Ocarina of Time and A Link to the Past. In some regards. I could hear those keyboards typing. Ocarina of Time and A Link to the Past are both masterpieces too, but I think for a different audience, Alundra is better. Much better in fact. Don't get me wrong, both those Zelda games are almost perfect. Too perfect. They were polished to within an inch of their lives, perfectly planned and paced adventures designed to be fun for both adults and kids. Anyone can play them and have an amazing time with meticulously balanced gameplay. Fighting that's not too easy or too hardcore, puzzles that require some thinking but won't let you frustrated. They're perfect for everyone. But Alundra is ballsy, daring, a much more mature take on the gameplay style. It's also meticulously planned, but planned to really make you think. It's a game that thinks highly of you. It believes that you can overcome this. And when you crack the solution, and when you pull it off, you feel great. Now, I don't want to say Alundra is for adults, because Zelda is also for adults, but it's for adults who want to take it to the next level, who don't want a game with all the edges sanded down. Alundra for me stands toe to toe with even the best Zelda games of all time. It's better in some regards, it's worse in some regards. It depends what you're looking for, but I sincerely hope you can give Alundra a try. I should mention the pixel artists. They did an amazing job here. It's one of the best pixel art games of all time, and it shines even nicer today than it did back then. Playing through this on an emulator on a HD TV, holy shit, those pixels pop. The attention to detail, the big chunky character sprites. Why don't pixel games look like this these days? Modern games have those like spindly ass character sprites that look laughable compared to this. God, I love Alundra. Just one thing before I wrap up. If you play Alundra, I advise you play just one dungeon per day. It's a tough game. It can be mentally taxing. physically too. I mean, my thumbs are still a little bit raw, but take your time with it, enjoy it, take it in slowly. Please find some way to play Alundra. Don't give up quickly, you will be a better, stronger, smarter person when you come out of the other side. I mean, I can almost count to 20 now. Before we end our adventure in this video, I have to go through some AI generated pictures that I made during my playthrough. Very early on, Septimus says that Alundra has a scar on his forehead, which immediately gives away who he is. He's obviously Harry Potter. I told you how torturous carrying torches was in this game. Well, here's Alundra being tortured by torches, apparently. You confront Ronan a couple of times before you finally battle with him. Well, I first expected him to morph into a dragon. He didn't, but this is what it would have looked like. Here's a priest morph into a dragon. How about Bonaire, who, I quote, "All you need is few of faith and a little bit of weed." Well, here he is praying and smoking a spliff at the same time. Here's Kirby getting mutated in Chernobyl. Here's a real monkey helicopter. And good old Wendell fighting off those Murgs with his sticks as the village burns down. What an absolute legend. And finally, not something funny, but I thought interesting, I wanted to know what a dream walker actually looks like. And this is it, apparently. Many thanks for watching. If you watched all the way through, then you are an absolute legend. The longer you watch, the more YouTube will show me to new people, maybe help me grow. So if you did watch all the way through, I want you to leave me a sleeping or dreaming kind of emoji so I can thank you. Once again, of course, special thanks to my Patreon supporters. Really, you are the world to me. Thank you ever so much. And a big shout out to super producer LS4. Thank you for your support. Go join them if you want to. Next time I've got a video about Jackie Chan's Stuntmaster. You won't want to miss it because I've thought of some really funny things already. I've not even played it and I've got loads of jokes in my head. And in the meantime, if you want a bit more Jordan, then head over to the Patreon because there is some bonus content over there that's not on YouTube right now. You can go watch it. They're interesting, they're fun. Thank you. Have a good one.